Hey guys, welcome back. I know it's been a really long time, and I meant to come out with this video before the end of 2020, but things kind of hit a snag when my dad was hospitalized with COVID, and sadly he did not make it. So that also meant I had to move because I was living with him. I'm back at my mom's house. So yeah, things changed all of a sudden, just out of the blue, and it sucked. And for a lot of you, 2020 was also a bitch. I'm with you. I have no love for 2020 either. So, why would I tell you this? Why would I tell you something so personal? I'm mainly talking to you guys who have subscribed, who have clicked on my videos, liked what you heard, liked my points of view, and decided you want more of it. Because to me, if you have to wait for my content, if it's not going to be a daily or weekly thing, and it takes longer than it usually does, I feel like I owe you an explanation. You've earned that. As someone who's put your trust in me and the content I provide, the least I can do is keep you informed as to what's going on. I mean, I've bitched about Capcom and other companies who give us a corporate, approved explanation that we all know is bullshit, and you've heard me say in the past, is like, if you just told us the truth, we'd understand. It's okay. So what kind of hypocritical piece of shit would I be if I just made excuses? No, I want to tell you guys the truth. You guys come to me for my honesty. So there's that. That being said, let's fucking get into this shit. Resident Evil 3, the remake. It is, well, this whole intro sequence was the shit, I will say that. It's very cool, very awesome. I've always kind of wondered what happened in the apartment when she, in the original game, she does a jumping roll out of a building, and the building, there's fire and shit behind her, and like, whoa, what the fuck happened there? And this kind of gives you that. It is a very, very cool intro. She has kind of a nightmare. You can tell that she's got some PTSD going on from the whole mansion incident, and they touch on that really, really well. But overall, this video is called The Biggest Flaws, so I'm going to talk about the flaws. I will, however, defend it where I do think it should be defended. As a game, as a Resident Evil game even, I think this is a good game. I do. As a remake of Resident Evil 3, I think it is kind of fucking terrible. I really do. I was very... I am so torn about whether or not, this did the... Well, no, I'm not torn about that. It didn't do the original Resident Evil 3 game justice, but it is a good enough game on its own that if you've never played the original Resident Evil 3, you probably will like this game. There are still some things you can gripe about, some of the frame rate drops and some of the, the gore sort of being reduced. This was developed by a different team. It wasn't the same team that did the Resident Evil 2 remake. I don't know what kind of limitations they were dealing with some of the gore, but there are instances where, I don't know, you don't see a lot of dismemberment like you did in Resident Evil 2, the remake. It's like they were working with less, and they had to get it out in a certain amount of time. And that being said, is it a good Resident Evil experience? Yeah, absolutely it is. It is. I mean, go ahead and, even if you played the original Resident Evil 3, if you just go into it expecting it to be Resident Evil, I don't know, subtitle, you'll probably like it. But if you go in expecting to relive all the best moments of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, you're going to be very, very disappointed, and there's no other way around that at all. By the way, I'm not using my good mic because I don't know where it is anymore because my mom moved it. You know how moms are with that. Yeah, and it's such a cliche. Like, I am literally a YouTuber living in his mom's basement, except she doesn't have a basement, so I'm in the living room. Yeah, so you're gonna hear some feedback and weird stuff in the background because I'm using the bass microphone. So sorry about that in advance. Anyway, where was I? It is not. They drop. I should have known from hearing first that they got rid of the live selection. Now, if you don't know what that is, those of you who did play Resident Evil 3, the original, you do know what it was. It was little moments in the game where it made you kind of do like your choose your own adventure option. Where I think the first one was when you're with the Nemesis in front of the RPD and you have the option to fight the monster or run inside the station. And it literally, like, the screen flashes and lets you choose between those two options. When I heard they weren't doing that, I was like, I was trying to give it the benefit of the doubt. I was, okay, well, maybe they want to do like a more canonical thing so as to not give it multiple endings and yada yada yada. But even then, like, that's part of what makes, you know, the first Resident Evil game and, you know, the third Resident Evil game sort of cool was like you could have multiple endings depending on how you did it. Even the original Resident Evil 2, because of the scenario A, scenario B thing, the game scenario was different depending on if you picked Leon or Claire. I mean, the first three games in the series had that variety, and with Resident Evil 3, you had so many direct choices. In the first Resident Evil, your choices weren't so much choices as they were things to accomplish or fail at. So if you didn't, save Rebecca as Chris from the Hunter later on in the game, she's fucking dead for the rest of the game. Things like that. It didn't give you a choice. Do you want to save Rebecca or, let her die? You just had to get there in time. And then later, that was nice of you, Chris. God, that was such a great line. Famously bad voice acting and a famously badly written script, but that's why we love it, because it was endearing. And Jill, here she is, the master of unlocking. But yeah, they took out the live selection, which really, for me, that was like, there was something deep in the pit of my stomach that was telling me, like, oh shit, they're gonna fuck this up. But I didn't listen to that thing. I still went into it with high hopes, and like I said, yeah, I enjoyed the game as a good Resident Evil experience, but not as a retelling of Resident Evil 3. I really did not. And it has to be pointed out, because remember, the last video I made I was talking about Trials of Mana, and it was like right before Final Fantasy VII Remake came out with, and that's a video coming out soon too, trust me. But we've talked about, like, can you update a game with its controls and just the way it plays and still retain what made the original great? And so far there's only one game that has convinced me you can, and that's Trials of Mana. So I'm going to be talking about Trials of Mana and probably even my video about Final Fantasy VII Remake, because I'm telling you guys, that game is a perfect remake. Alright? In some ways it's almost more perfect than the original Resident Evil remake on the GameCube, because in some ways it's not fair, because Resident Evil was a horror game, so there are changes they had to make in order to make it more suspenseful, because it's a horror game. But it's not their fault. They did it to keep you guessing, to keep the players who played the original, unsure of what was different and what was changed and what else was gonna fuck with them. Because previously we'd played the original, we knew where all the items were, we knew how to win, beat all the traps and puzzles. And they had to change some of that because they had to retain some of that sense of horror. Well, with Trials of Mana, it was an RPG, and there was really nothing much to change. And that game is almost 100% like the same game, except it's not in terms of gameplay, in terms of POV, everything. So I know it's possible to, if you feel like the old format is outdated, in this case I'm talking about like the fixed camera angles and things like that. Yeah, you guys know where I stand on that. I would have preferred, Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 to stay as they were. But they did do a good job in recreating the sense of horror and still making it challenging by making it over the shoulder. But they didn't do enough of a good job to show, the diehards, like myself mostly, that you could do it without reducing something. I'd been saying that you had to, in order to, remake the game this much from the ground up, you were going to lose some things, you were going to change some things. There were some modern standards that they couldn't do anymore that were inevitably going to change, so it's always worth playing the original game. And with Resident Evil 3, there was so much they cut out that they absolutely, it was needless. You didn't have to cut it out. You really did not. And it would have been a great game. Was it the time frame they had to make it? Maybe that's why, but it was unnecessary, and the game, and I'm telling you, even if you hadn't played the original Resident Evil 3, and you have played the remake now, and you liked it, I'm telling you, it could have been a lot better. I'm not joking about that. I mean, those of you who have played the original, you know what the hell I'm talking about. Okay, hard edit right here, guys. I had to go get my mic. I couldn't make my big comeback with shit sound. Alright, sorry. Yeah, that's much better. Yeah, I'm pretty meticulous. I'll listen to how it sounds, while I'm making the video to make sure there's not a problem. Sometimes I do miss things, but I wanted to come back, 100%. Anyway, there are many motivations behind remaking a classic game. And depending on what one individual developer's motivations are, it is going to proportionally be respectful or mirror the original game's content. And this game feels like they wanted to just give you the basic gist of Resident Evil 3 without actually having to deliver on the full package. This Brad sequence here, yeah, it's neat that they gave him a more heroic sort of send-off here, but in the original game, you run into the Nemesis. You run into him at a bar, he warns you about the Nemesis. So Jill hasn't met the Nemesis in her apartment like this game suggests. And that was one thing, there had been fan fictions, yeah, I know. Fan fictions and fan speculation about what Jill was doing in that apartment, but I mean, if you paid attention, she escapes that apartment, the building explodes, yada yada yada, but then she goes to a place where she's been holed up with this dude named Dario, who you do meet in this game, but that whole scene suggests that she's kind of been holed up with this dude for, I don't know, a day or so, and his daughter's dead, and he just wants to hide forever. But she hasn't met the Nemesis yet. It's not until she runs into Brad, and Brad warns her that there's something hunting STARS members, that she learns of the Nemesis, and then Nemesis shows up and just fucking ganks his ass. And, you gotta run, and, then you have that choice. Do you fight the monster, or do you run into the police station, and that's your first little life selection. But there had always been speculation that the Nemesis came for Jill, in the middle of the night in her apartment, which is cool to think about. It would have been a gripping scene, and they did that, and they definitely did that in this game with that whole intro sequence. But you, as a player, learning it from Brad, I always felt was a little bit more ominous. But that does leave the question is like, what the fuck happened in that apartment? I always assumed, she just found out all her fucking neighbors were zombies now, or she found some zombies, former neighbors, chomping on each other outside, and she realized she had to get, I don't know. Yeah, there's Dario right there. She realized she had to fucking burn the whole motherfucker down because it's full of zombies. Because she was at the mansion, she saw what went down. And so she just, lit the place on fire and got the fuck out of there. But we never knew. And I liked this game's intro sequence a lot, but the intro I wouldn't have changed. I would have probably kept, the scene with Brad getting killed by the Nemesis, and when he's warning her, she could just be like, yeah, I know, he came after me, in my room, and holy shit, and he did warn her over the phone anyway, so you didn't have to change much there. The thing is, you didn't have to change really a lot. You didn't have to change the map. There were some issues with the police station map in Resident Evil 2 that they needed to really address, like the fucking parking lot being, in a weird, illogical location on the map. I mean, if you look at it, you'll see what I mean. There were no bathrooms at the RPD station, for instance, famously. But Resident Evil 3 map didn't really need to change at all, and you really could, if you were so pressed for time, like, the development of this game suggests, why did they have to deviate so much? They could have just really kept all the choices intact, kept all of the story beats intact, kept the fucking map intact, and just made it, third person over the shoulder. And it would have been perfectly fine. Yeah, you're going to need a new script. I get that. That's the other thing. A lot of people were having a problem with Jill's potty mouth, as they called it in this game. I don't have a problem with that, and I can tell you why I don't have a problem with that. Because as much as I do care about staying true to the source material, the thing you got to realize about games from the 90s and their cheesy dialogue is just because there was a rating system and your game could be rated M for mature, you could tell a lot of game developers, and it's not that you could tell back then, but in retrospect, it's just something I noticed. A lot of game developers didn't know what they could get away with in terms of like harsh adult dialogue. So you didn't really have many games, dropping some fucking F-bombs or any of that really. Like the worst they go is like damn and hell and maybe shit, but like nobody really. I can tell you the first time I saw a mainstream video game on a console drop the F-bomb, it was The Getaway. Remember that game? It was like a British GTA, took place in London on the PlayStation 2, and I remember that, like, one of the opening cutscenes where I don't even remember what the fuck they said, but it was like, oh, you fucking wanker. And I was like, oh shit, he just said fuck. That's fucking awesome. And it was jaw-dropping. I think the first video game to actually drop an F-bomb was probably on PC. But again, you know me, I wasn't a big PC guy back then. But yeah, so the dialogue from even the greatest games of all time, Resident Evil and Silent Hill and Final Fantasy, they didn't really... Their dialogue was cheesy because they had to express what was going on, and they couldn't do it realistically. Because realistically, if you're in a zombie apocalypse, you're going to be dropping lots of F-bombs, okay? So I don't have a problem with Jill and the gang talking realistically and dropping F-bombs all over the place, because that's more realistic, and you can write your script more realistically now. So I'll give him a pass on that one. I definitely will. Um, it's also why I give him a pass on the clothing. Yeah, I like the old clothing. I like the old costume. They did it with Resident Evil 2 also with Claire's outfit. They were going for a more realistic, grounded, vibe. I get it. Um, would I prefer the old outfit? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And that's another thing. Speaking of outfits, what the fuck is he wearing? What is the Nemesis wearing? He looks like his Mexican abuela made him a Halloween costume out of, like, fucking trash bags. Like, what the fuck? What happened to his black leather trench coat that he was wearing? Like, and why does he have that thing on his... I don't mind the changes they made to his face so much, even though it was sort of weird. In motion, it seemed it's better. But his outfit in general, he looks like he's wearing a coat made out of trash bags, like black industrial trash bags. I don't know what that's about. I don't know who greenlit that, who thought that was a good idea, but it's fucking terrible. And if this is the canon Nemesis now, fuck that so much. I do like the new Carlos. That's one thing I will say. I like the new Carlos. He's better than the old Carlos. I don't know about you guys, but I tend to get really protective of female protagonists in my favorite media. What do I mean by that? In video games, in books, in comics, in TV shows, movies, whatever. The female characters that I really like, I don't want them to end up with just some schmuck. You know what I mean? Like I didn't like Steve Burnside in Code Veronica because I thought he was a fucking cuck, and Carlos in Resident Evil 3, I thought he was kind of lame. He was throwing out his fucking cheesy, just really lame with his lame accent. This Carlos is badass, though. I really like him. I like his redesign. I like his voice. He's a fucking man's man. But let me get back to a point I touched on earlier, the costumes. Now, even though I can forgive this redesigned main costume, what I cannot forgive is the redesigned original, like, OG costume that they made available for this game. That's supposed to be a skirt she's wearing, not a pair of skirts. Okay? I don't know what the fuck that is, but that ain't what she was wearing in the original game. And I don't know what that was about. I don't know what kind of pressure Capcom was under from either the Japanese rating board, CERO, CERO, or if that was from, like, SJW PC pressure from the West. But it needs to go the fuck away, and you need to pay respect to your old fans, okay? I want to be very clear about that. CERO, by the way, it could be more of a CERO thing, because these guys have some weird ass fucking thing about looking up the female character skirts. I'm not joking. Like, that's not even a joke. Like, look it up. It's CERO, and I don't know. Type in upskirt. Don't do a Google image search. No, just regular Google search. CERO rating upskirt, whatever. Actually, you know what? Do a CERO Sakurai, the Smash Brothers guy. Yeah, because apparently he had to jump through a few hoops with CERO when he was making the Smash Brothers games, and it sucks. He says that they told him, like, could you show us all the female characters upside down, please? Yeah, no, that's what they said. And Sakurai is, at least, like, he seems cool. He seems like he's tired of this shit. Like, he thinks it's a waste of time and this and that. And sometimes, game companies, when they're making several, international releases, different versions have to be censored this way or that way. and sometimes they cut corners and just kind of censor it for everybody. Um, and just with the way things are in the West, it wouldn't surprise me if Capcom were just like, let's just avoid controversy. Because there were also some leaks out of Capcom recently, and those were legit leaks. I mean, because they were hacked. Like Capcom was legit hacked, so those leaks were very legit. We learned a few things that games they were working on, this and that, but there was also like a memorandum for how to avoid controversy in the West, and just having to do with, costumes for, male characters, female characters, same old shit. They really, honestly, they should just be who they are. I'm tired of the shit. I've been playing games since the early, well, earlier than that. I mean, since at least 1989. It's as far back as I can remember myself playing video games. And they were as violent and they were lewd and they were awesome. And then you have this younger millennial / Gen Z crowd accusing us of gatekeeping when they weren't interested before. And so they come in and they demand changes to accommodate them, and it should be them trying to fit in with us, but the fuck do I know, I guess. Plus I've been gaming on like PC lately, on a really good high-end gaming PC, and I've been playing Resident Evil 2 and 3 on there, and there are some pretty sick mods. So I mean, if Capcom doesn't want any of the blowback, at least authorize official mods, better costumes. But to do a half-ass like original Jill Resident Evil 3, let's go out to the club, oh no, the world ended kind of outfit, they shouldn't fuck with that. It's a timeless look. People were expecting it. It did piss off a lot of people. And not just dudes. It also pissed off chicks. Don't fucking play. Don't pretend. This is misogyny. This is toxic masculinity. No, fuck off. Like, girls like cute outfits too. Okay, like, I'm fucking sick of this shit. But yeah, so if they don't want any of the blowback, just authorize some fucking mods. I mean, come on. But anyway, there are... So this subway, for instance, in the original game, it's not a subway. It's a cable car railway system, kind of like they have in, like, San Francisco. And you have to... You have to change the map drastically in order to do this, and again, if they were stressed for time, why did they change so much? Like, there's no mercenaries mode. The mercenaries mode originated in the original Resident Evil 3. It would have been so fucking sweet to have brought it back in this game. You've got characters to play. You don't have to worry about not having a RE engine scanned, Chris and like Leon and Claire. You don't have to put everybody. You could put Leon and Claire though, because you have them as assets from Resident Evil 2, and it would be fun. You could play as Mikhail, you could play as Carlos, you could play as Nikolai. I mean, it'd be awesome. Now Resistance is it's a pretty cool game, but it's not enough. It also made those Outbreak fans kind of pissed off, because it's like, this is the closest thing to Outbreak we've had. But a mercenaries mode at least would have kind of tided them over. People are going to still want either a remake of Outbreak or a remaster, because Outbreak was fucking amazing. But yeah, I mean, You have to change the map drastically in order to install a subway system. They didn't have to do that. If they were pressed for time, they could just stick to the map that was in the original game, keep the puzzles the same, keep it all the same. None of it has to change. Really, it does not. Only thing you have to worry about now is, the new cutscenes, the new dialogue, the look of everything. That's fine. But there were things you could do in the original game that you don't get to do in this game. Yeah, you can drop the Nemesis like you could in the original game, and then when you drop the Nemesis, you can get, stuff. But in the original game, you get like gun parts and shit. To make new guns, you get like the Eagle Parts A, Eagle Parts B to make the Eagle pistol, which is awesome because it came with a sight and stuff like that, which didn't handle any differently in the original game, but it was more powerful. And then you get the Western shotgun, Western custom, parts A and B. You put that together, you get a new badass looking Western shotgun, and it's better than the regular shotgun. And you use those for a while until you are able to craft enhanced ammo, which they cannot load, so you have to go back to your old guns, and your old guns can load the enhanced ammo, and it's fun. There were so many aspects of the original Resident Evil 3 that should have been in this game but weren't. The dodge is neat and everything. I like the way it handled it, but I would have preferred more of a like Resident Evil Revelations 1 style dodge, because it was like more automatic and like more safe. There was like a safe invincibility frame when you executed it, and this is more manual. It functions well enough, so it's fine. It's not a big deal, the dodge thing. But what was really, that live selection really was a big oversight, because there was nothing that really matched the feeling. I'd always wanted it to come back in a future Resident Evil game, because every time you made the right choice, every time you like, one of my favorites was when you're hiding in that kitchen and there's a window there. Was it the kitchen? Anyway, one of them was like hide behind this thing or jump out the window. And jump out the window seems like a better option, because you're away from the Nemesis. He's coming up the stairs. But if you just sit there and hide, there's like a gas leak that's there, and he happens to walk by just as the damn thing fucking explodes, and it takes him out, and that's actually like a freebie. That's one of the times you can go grab one of the items from him real quick. But it felt so good to have made like that right choice, and they really, really needed that back. I don't want this video to be too long, so I want to get to the point on the things they really fucked up. Namely, the Nemesis himself. Mr. X in the Resident Evil 2 remake was a force to be reckoned with. He made you fucking like shudder. He made you like wait in a room and like make sure the 3D surround sound was on so you could hear where he was, and you could listen for his footsteps and make sure he passed by. If you were like in the STARS office, he wouldn't go in there, but he was in that fucking hallway, and you could listen for where he was and like get out of there and go the other way once you were sure he was down the hall. This Nemesis is far too scripted to be as terrifying as he was in the original game. And in the original game, he did appear at scripted moments, yes. But there were times in the game where he was, hunting for you. You had to be aware that he was there. You had to accomplish your goals quickly. And there was only so much you could do. He was worse than the Mr. X from the original Resident Evil 2. And so logically, this Nemesis should have been worse than the Mr. X from the remake of Resident Evil 2. But they failed to do that. And there were so many missed opportunities. Like, you don't even have to, like, yeah, he can run, but you could have given Jill the ability to hide in fucking lockers and fucking dumpsters underneath cars. Like, let her hide and shit. Like, if the Nemesis is too fast for you and you don't think you can outrun him or get to where you need to be on the map, without him chasing you down and fucking killing your ass. Like, let Jill hide and then, like, wait for him to run past you, lose sight of you, and then make a break for it. Like, there were so many creative things, and Capcom has done it in other games of theirs. Like, you know, they've done it in fucking Haunting Ground and fucking Clock Tower. Like, there were so many things you could have done to make the experience of being hunted by the Nemesis feel more visceral and more, you know, realistic and terrifying. And they didn't even fucking touch that. Yeah, he'd show up with a new weapon. Oh, he's got a flamethrower now. Yay. Yeah, no, that'd be cool in addition to all the shit I'm talking about, but that's not what they did. It was completely half-assed. And like I said, this is an enjoyable game if you've never played the original Resident Evil 3. It's fine. It's an enjoyable game if you just feel like a Resident Evil game, even if you have played the original Resident Evil 3. But if you were hoping for... If you're somebody who loved the original Resident Evil 3, and you were really hoping to relive it, but with modern graphics and modern gameplay, yeah, you're shit out of luck, because that's not this game. And you know me, I love Capcom, I love video games, but I am not a fucking liar. I have to be honest, because if I'm not honest, I mean, it doesn't... My recommendations mean fucking nothing if I'm not honest. So I have to be honest, and I hate how much I have to bash this game, but I do. It fucking sucks, but I have no choice. I will say this, the music was on point. That's for sure. See, they cut corners with the music. They didn't bother to put completely new tracks like they did with Resident Evil 2. They sort of just modernized and remixed the original music from the game, and it's cool. It sounds cool. It still fits. It still holds up well. The old save room music is there. That's great. The music is definitely one of the best parts of this game, but it's also, you're just not going to notice it as much over the things they got wrong. And again, you know, if you never played Resident Evil 3, you'll still like this game, and you still might if you did play Resident Evil 3, but you will find yourself having to forgive a lot. Not necessarily forgive. You'll have to just kind of overlook it and just accept this as a different game. There are areas that are sort of an homage to the original game, but they're different, and they're not better. That's the thing. None of the new things, none of the new map changes, none of the new plot beats, none of the new things they changed. I'll say that. The things they changed, I was going to say things they added. No, the things they added are cool, but the things they changed, they aren't better than what the original game did. That's the thing. There was nothing too crazy in the old game that wouldn't work today. There just wasn't. Because, I mean, if you recall, a lot of us were worried they were going to take out the crocodile in Resident Evil 2, you know, because it might be too outlandish and ridiculous. But no, they left it in. Good for them. They should have. But there was really nothing like that we needed to worry about in Resident Evil 3, the original. So they didn't have to change anything. And in fact, in changing things and in wanting to keep the time to complete the game around the same, they had to take stuff out. I mean, they took out the park. That was a big deal. That's actually where you ran into the Hunter Gammas. And even though the new Hunter Gammas in this game are, you know, pretty cool, okay, but you've enlarged them to the point where they don't even look like hunters anymore. At least the Hunter Gammas looked like hunters in the original. They had the big open mouths like they do here, but imagine shrinking those Hunter Gammas that are in this game down to, you know, hunter size, but with the big, you know, gaping mouths and that insta-kill move where they can just swallow you whole. It'd be pretty gnarly to watch them do that to Jill in this game. But yeah, you kind of changed the nature of that monster a little too much, and you also left out You also left out the tarantulas. I've talked about that, how I felt about that in Resident Evil 2. Because you took out the clock tower. Why? How the fuck could you take out the clock tower? And then, not only do you take out the clock tower, you tease the clock tower. You know, you pick up the flyer, and it talks about, you know, the historic clock tower, this and that. And you're like, oh, hell yeah, I guess I'm going to go there soon. It's going to be badass. Because, you know, usually it's kind of a trope. Video games will give you a hint as to where you're going next, or they'll allude to something, or there'll be some foreshadowing. They did it a lot in Resident Evil 4, for instance. Like, the big one was like when you're reading the chief's note, and you know it's a note to Lord Sadler, and he's like, I clearly underestimated this American agent. Like, fuck this guy, he's too good. So my plan is to make him choose one of two paths, and they both fucking suck. And that was a really good foreshadowing of it. But they kind of used to do that all the time. You'd pick up a file, and it would say, you know, it would describe the area you're going to, and it'd be, you know, in the guise of a brochure or something. Well, when you pick it up in this game, you're like, oh, sick, I'm going to the clock tower next, badass. Nope. It's not even in the game. And if you're going to add all this stuff, like, the game should have been a lot longer. If you wanted so much to do what you did and still be respectful, you should have made the game longer. A lot of people were complaining about the length. It's not the length that's the problem, because the game was same thing with Resident Evil 2 Remake. The games were always that short. The original games. Resident Evil 4 and 5 were, well, and 6 were super long. And I got kind of used to the super long too, and that's why I think a lot of people were, you know, complaining about the length of these remakes. But no, they were always that short. So that's not a problem, but I hope they didn't. When I heard that Resident Evil 2 was going to take into consideration speedrunners, I was like, okay, but don't make that. Don't cause that to make you make the game shorter than it should be. And maybe that's not the motivation, because the unlocks in this game, I actually do like the way you unlock shit in this game. I hate speedrunning. I really do. I don't understand speedrunners. I'm just like, why would you want to rush through a totally great game? Like, why? What the fuck? But I know it's got its audience. It's got its own, you know, unique little fan base niche. But, like, I hope they don't count out too much to them. And so, if you intend to make the game that short as it used to be, again, you shouldn't change much. Just update it. But don't change as much as you did. I mean, really, it's cool that the knife is invincible now. It doesn't have a durability, but I wish they'd let you map it to R2 like the Revelations games. That would have been better, instead of making it take up a slot in your inventory and your quick item select. But whatever. Yeah, there was just... Man, they really should hire, like, I don't know, a council of fans, of gamers / fans, and ask them, like, how do you like this? What do you like about this? And we'd tell them. And again, like, remember what I said last time? I was like, man, I wish they would hire me to, like, be in charge of making people piss their pants, because, like, I would have made the Nemesis so fucking terrifying. Like, you'd have fucking nightmares about the Nemesis. I mean, like, the Nemesis is also smarter than your average tyrant, your average Mr. X. Like, when Jill is knocked out and incapacitated in the original game, and you take over as Carlos, and again, he takes over and goes into the hospital, so that's different. But he, the Nemesis, I mean, he doesn't go after Carlos. He's not after Carlos. He's after Jill because she's a STARS member, and in the lore and shit, you find out that like the Nemesis knows where the fuck you are, and he waits for Jill to come back, and then he goes right back onto the hunt. And you really could have played with aspects of how intelligent the Nemesis was and the way he searches for you. Like again, it's been done before. It's been done in Resident Evil 6 as recently as Resident Evil 6 with the Ustanok, Jake and Sherry's campaign. Like, if you hide in the same place too often, like, he's gonna figure it out. Just have him figure it out. Have him give the ability to, like, if you're bleeding, maybe if you're hurt, let the Nemesis, like, follow the trail of blood. I mean, like, make him a fucking force to be reckoned with. Like, you could have done so much, Capcom. So much. I almost think this game deserves, like, a Resident Evil 3 director's cut. And just make it better. And again, the more I talk like this, the more it sounds like I think the game completely sucks. I don't think it completely sucks as a game, or even as a Resident Evil game. But it does suck as a remake of Resident Evil 3. It just does, and I hate it, but it's true, and I can't deny that. Like, I can't deny that one bit. Or you know what? I just realized I completely didn't even make my point about how smart the Nemesis was in the original game. So in the original game, he infects Jill with the T-virus, just like he does in this game. And, that puts her out of commission, and you gotta play as Carlos for a bit. And since he knows where Jill's body is, he could just, if he were the mindless beast that he is, that he seems to be, he would just go in and kill her. But he was smart enough to wait and see if she comes out a zombie, or if she and Carlos are a zombie, because he knows she was with Carlos. And if she does, mission complete. You don't have to worry about it. It's only after she survives and he notices that he continues the hunt. That's the whole point I meant about he sat there and waited for a little bit. So he was smart enough to do that. And you really could have played with this in this game, Capcom. Like, you really kind of fucked that up. Another thing that you kind of fucked up too is it's not Carlos that goes to the Raccoon City police station in the original game. It's Jill. She goes back, gets some shit. You have to go through there, and they really could have played with that so much, because there were, they do explain where that big ass hole, one of the big ass holes in the RPD walls came from. It's because Carlos, blew it up. But I was really hoping we were going to find out in a remake of Resident Evil 3 that was one of the holes that the fucking Nemesis made while he was chasing Jill through the RPD station. Like, some of those, like, holes, giant holes in the building, they were already there, not made by Mr. X. I was like, I wonder if that's a nod to the Nemesis, and they could have really fucked with that. And you could have met, like, Marvin and had different scenes there. You could have played, you have some survivors. David Ford, for instance, would be there. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, this whole scene gave me like half a chub. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. It was more than half. But anyway, you could have met, David Ford. He seemed like a cool dude. You could have met, Marvin when he wasn't hurt. Like, could have seen some of your friends. They could have talked about Chris. I mean, you could have had, you could have really opened that up. And because in the original game there were sort of some continuity errors in terms of like the barricades and shit and where they were located. If Resident Evil 3 was a prequel to Resident Evil 2, they kind of fucked some things up there, and you could have fixed out all that. But it would have been really cool to go back to the station, with Jill again, and again, like they really didn't have to change much except for the things that needed to be updated and, you know, fixed continuity-wise. I mean, the scene with Bob Kendo was cool and all, but that's all we got. I mean, Christ, you could have had a scene with fucking Brian Irons. That would have been badass. Like Jill fucking cussing him out, calling him a dick, whatever. You know, maybe, I don't know. Like, you could have done so much. I don't know. I don't know if Capcom had the balls to tackle on something like that. But that's where my council of fans would come in. This would be different from like I'm not talking about like QA testers. I'm talking about actual like diehard Resident Evil fans, trusted dudes that wouldn't leak anything, that wouldn't fucking like spill the beans to anything. They could give their honest, like, experienced, you know, opinions about what they could do and what they could add, and you'd let them in on like what's possible and what's not possible, and you'd let them know if, you know, hey, your idea was like super cool, we can't fit it in this game, but maybe we'll use it for another one because it's a really good idea. You know, throw out some ideas like that. I mean, you could. If I'm thinking up all this shit, I can only imagine what other diehard fans are thinking of. And why is it? I've asked this before. I asked it for my Resident Evil 7 video. Like, if I can think up shit like this, why can't Capcom's dev teams think of shit like this? Like, why? It shouldn't have to come from me. Like. And I'm not saying they don't love the games, but, you know, they don't think of everything. And if you're going to tackle something like remaking beloved games, you need to not... They need to be fucking perfect. Like, they really do. My next video, I've already decided, is going to be about whether I think it's a good enough or a good idea to remake Resident Evil 4. I'll go ahead and tell you right now, I don't. I don't think they have what it takes. I really don't. I want to be wrong. I want them to prove me wrong, but I don't think they have what it takes to remake that game, because that game is a fucking masterpiece, and you don't fuck with that. I won't say any more because I got to save it for the video, but yeah, no, I don't think they should remake Resident Evil 4. Not with what they're working with now.
Carlos, respond.
They really should not. But, you know, as far as what they did in this game, I know this video is already fucking long. I already decided a while back. No, I got shit to say about it, so I'm saying it. Alright? Fuck it, the video's long.
Nikolai left us to die.
They missed out on so much. So many missed opportunities. And again, they made a good game, but it's too different from the original. It really is. The Nemesis also, his mutations are when he mutated in this form as early as he did in the game, or at the time he did, I think this is the moment I knew I wasn't going to the clock tower. I think that's when it happened. And then when he infects her after this fight, I'm just like, ah, fuck. We're not going to the clock tower, are we? Shit. Yeah, you know what it was? I think it's because Carlos took her to the hospital immediately, and thus entered the hospital zone, and to use video game terms, immediately, bypassing the clock tower completely, or the whole cathedral area, and that meant that part was out. You don't... Yeah, but again, you know, that also comes from the changes in Carlos's mission, you know, to rescue this new character with Dr. Nathaniel Bard. He was never in the original game. That was a whole little new chapter, which would have been cool in addition to all the original story content from the original game, but as a replacement, it meant you had to change things. Again, like I was saying, the things you wanted to add and put in forced you to leave out things that were perfectly fine to keep in the original game. And the whole reason you hide out in the whole clock tower area is because, you know, it's out of the way. In the middle of a zombie apocalypse, you're not going to run into the fucking hospital. There's places fucking lousy with zombies, probably. You know what else you wouldn't do at the hospital is conduct your top secret evil bioweapon research, Umbrella. Like, Nest 2, you're going to call it Nest 2 after you called the one in the last game the Nest? And then, no, like, you're going to keep a whole wing of the hospital, like the whole basement sublevel, a secret that you don't think that's going to get out? It just seems, no, like you there was no reason to change any of the shit that was in the original game. There really wasn't. I mean, one of my nephews recently played this game and beat it, and he actually really loved it, and that confirmed my suspicion that most people, if they haven't played Resident Evil 3, the original, they'll like this game perfectly. It is a perfectly fine Resident Evil game. It absolutely is. But, you know, there were parts of the original that became iconic, and there were parts of the original that made sense. The whole reason there was a fucking lab underneath the mansion, Arclay Forest, is because it was a front. Umbrella didn't want anyone to know all the fucked up shit they were doing, so they hid it, you know, underneath a fucking mansion, or they hid it underneath, you know, like, there was already that was the main facility in Resident Evil 2 was the main facility in Resident Evil 3. Like, they didn't need another main facility inside the city limits. Alright, that's way too fucking risky. Like, they wouldn't do that. I like how Nest 2 looks in this game. Everything looks fucking cool, but they should have saved it for another game. They really should have, and just let the natural course of the original Resident Evil 3 just take its course. Just let it go. You didn't have to do any of that shit. I will say this, Nikolai's expanded role is pretty great. Nikolai is fucking great in this game. Like, he was a dick before, he's a dick in this one, but in this one you kind of, I don't know, I kind of respected him more in this game. Like, you know, he's one of those, he's your seminal mercenaries. I mean, he's out to get fucking paid, and I love his, you know, his banter with Jill, and he's just a fucking asshole, and he's a great villain. And they also gave him a better send-off, because in the original game he goes out like a bitch, Nemesis fucking kills him, and, you know, that's that. But in this game, you know, they at least give him, you know, a worthy death. But you know what they really fucked up was the ending. The helicopter ride out of there. One of the fucking endings ends with you and Carlos getting into the helicopter, and behold, the pilot is none other than Mr. Barry Burton. Alright? Yeah, it's really cheesy, because he's like, you ready to do this? You ready to storm Umbrella and fuck shit up and make them pay for all the lives they've taken? And yeah, no, he doesn't say all that, but he mostly looks at Jill and is like, are you ready to do this? You know, suggesting they're gonna go hunt down Umbrella. I was like, yeah, it's gonna be a lengthy process, but whatever. But you didn't have to make it cheesy. Just have it be Barry, you know? It, like, you took it out. You took it out. Why? Fucking why? I don't get it. I really don't. It was unnecessary. That's all I can think of for now. I have to end this video at some point, so I'll end it here shortly. I am coming out with more content for you guys. I really appreciate you sticking by me. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, recommend me to a friend, do all that stuff. I've got quite a few things on the way. Like I said, my next video is definitely Resident Evil 4 remake related. And I hope you like this video. I think you will like the next one, even if you disagree with me, even if you're super psyched that they're remaking it. I think you'll see where I'm coming from at least. So I will see you guys next time.